Our topic assesses the effectiveness of the U.S. education system. So, by a show of hands, how many of you believe that our education system effectively prepares students for the real world? Raise your hands if you think so. Okay. In actuality, a report by College Board shows that 42% of students feel unprepared for the real world.
In order to understand the statistic, we need to ask ourselves, how should the U.S. education system be altered in order to provide students with an accurate representation of the real world? To answer this question, we will go over academic stress, the technological aspects of school, and then address a solution.
Firstly, let's talk about how our current education system creates academic stress. So at its core, our education is meant to prepare students for their future jobs and careers. Okay, so our current public education system has its roots in 19th century America, where schools throughout the nation vary depending on religious majority or the industry of that town. But at the same time, people believed that education would be able to solve the country's socioeconomic problems. And so public education became tailored to the masses, leading to the creation of standardized tests and curriculum. However, today, those practices are still heavily enforced, and at this stage in our society, it's rather than being useful, it has become too overbearing. For example, teachers feel that the high stakes of tests place too much stress on their classrooms, and learning is often lost to companies who exploit standardized tests for their profit. Alright, so to combat this, most schools now offer their students advanced pathways like pre-AP courses, honor courses, or AP courses like the one that we are in now. However, these run the same risk as standardized tests do. They could result to just teaching for the test due to the stress of a large exam in the end. And success largely depends on a teacher's ability to teach. If the teacher cannot teach it correctly, then students will get no more benefit than if they have chosen a regular course.
So along with the preparation of students, another factor of academic stress is the grading systems. One example is the pass-fail grading system, where anyone who scores between a 70 to 100 will pass the class, and anyone who scores between a 0 to 70 will fail the class. Another lesser-known grading system is the standards-based grading system, where a student will learn the skill, practice it, and then be tested on it. And then depending on the grade they get, they will either continue on and complete their mastery of the concept or practice again. This concept gives students and individuals the time to work on their quality skills, but it's impossible for teachers to teach in a classroom because every student learns differently. And then another example is the traditional scale, which is a numerical and letter grading scale. And this encourages students to improve in their tests and their average score because every point counts to their final grade. But it encourages cheating because due to competition.
So competition is usually implemented in schools with class strength, which is determined by your grades. The strength of competition is that it motivates students who would usually get by doing the bare minimum amount of work. However, this motivation is purely grade-based, as there is more emphasis placed on getting a certain grade rather than learning the material. Furthermore, this pressure to get a grade can lead students to cheat, as Serena said earlier, and causes a shortcut mentality. This pressure to get a certain grade also creates a large amount of stress for students, which can lead to the formation of mental illnesses such as depression and anxiety, which is harmful to a student's academic career and their personal lives.
Next, we're going to look at how life in the digital age impacts the current education system by the integration of technology. So to start, I'm going to talk about the transformation of society by the evolution of technology. So we begin with one-room classrooms, and then we develop things like headphones, and then we get to those Texas Instrument calculators that you guys use in your math classes, then Scantrons that teachers use to effectively grade your multiple choice questions, to the smartboard that I'm currently presenting on, and iPads. So all of this has led to a rise in internet access in public schools and correspondingly a decline in the ratio of students to student laptops because now more students have access to their individual laptops. So all of this leads to a product of transformation, which is technological dependence. And to explain the consequences of technology, I'm going to use the acronym BREACH. So budget. Budget. All schools have a budget, and they spend approximately $53 billion towards providing students with laptops. That is a lot of money, and what that does is lead to removal of programs such as arts programs, which are actually crucial to the development of kids, and it also leads to losses of teachers' jobs. So those all come at the expense of technology. Encroachment on privacy. Everything is shifting online. So because of that, it's easier to breach students' information and it invades their privacy. Additional resources. That may sound like a plus, but that's like a large reservoir of information, and it makes cheating and plagiarism easier. So students can easily grab, paste, and submit, and it's harder for teachers, like they're not capable of finding if the students have actually developed what they produced. And all of this leads to a shortcut mentality, which is the main thing because technology is all about convenience and getting things done quickly. Whereas in schools, what you're supposed to do is take your time, learn to reflect, and not take shortcuts. So basically, schools are not supposed to foster that shortcut mentality that technology does provide. So basically, right now, we have a focus on things like keyboarding and things that don't really help us too much in like the future. So instead, what they should do is focus on things such as communication abilities, software development, and now we're all moving, all jobs are moving towards they're advancing in technology. So it's important that people have a basis for how to work technology for their future jobs. So it all comes down to excessive media stimulus at an inappropriate age. So technology is not having the impact that it should on schools because it's not helping kids develop the way they actually should. So we don't want to compete with this excessive media stimulus by providing it in schools. Rather, schools should be a sanctuary for this kind of environment.
Okay, so accounting both technological factors and academic stress, we have some potential solutions to improve students' representation in the real world. One example is the pass-fail grading system. We should implement this into more education because it can decrease stress and it can encourage students to take whatever class they want because a 70 or 100 is the exact same grade. But this system cannot compare two students in the real world because it does not show the performance or knowledge level.
Right, another solution that our team looked into was project-based learning. So project-based learning is typically groups of students working together, they're teaching themselves, guiding themselves through solving real-world projects. The benefit of project-based learning is that it's more clear what skills they get from projects and how they apply to the real world because you're solving such open-ended, real-world themed problems. However, a big problem with project-based learning is that it's not as clearly defined, like what to teach, the curriculum, how it should be graded is not as clearly defined as our current school system. So its effectiveness is super unequal among schools.
Another potential solution is the removal of student exposure of technology at schools. So currently, all of our jobs are dependent on students with a vivid imagination, and technology inhibits that. So the complete removal of that would help, but it's hard to implement in a society that's constantly advancing.
So although we can't change our technological advancement in society, we can control how it's implemented in schools. This solution, growing technological exposure, involves gradually introducing technology in schools starting in middle school and increasing the amount in high schools.
After going through the process of analyzing all these possible solutions, our team has come up with the conclusion that project-based learning and proper usage and enforcement of technology is the most effective and viable solution. One of the results of project-based learning is the implementation of it if universal standards are established, as well as a reduction of stress and competition, as project-based learning puts the emphasis on the student learning for themselves rather than learning for a letter grade. And a limitation that is set by the implementation of, by the proper usage and enforcement of technology is that technology is always changing and progressing because change is obviously an inherent aspect of our society. Thank you.
Here's our big dog that
Okay. Let's see. Who should I start? All right, Serena. Having finished your project, what, if anything, do you consider to be the gap in your team's research?
Okay, so our presentation mainly focused on public schools and the education system, but if we decided to incorporate like private schools or like higher levels of education such as college, it could represent the student population more.
Okay. So, Malik, describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that made you think differently about your team's solution.
Well, one thing that made me think differently about our team solution was Kushi's argument on the encroachment of technology into our personal lives. Because when you think about it, technology, it's something that is very social, and we sort of embrace that, but then you see that it has very negative aspects, and so on the team solution, you have to take into account if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
All right, so, Kushi, Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem?
I think Shivani's had the most impact on ours because she provided a student perspective, and that's important to understand, like in terms of the U.S. education system and how it's ineffective.
Okay. What is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' individual reports that you didn't include, Shivani?
So Malika's research was centered around dress code, and she had a good point about how it limited creativity, but we had to cut it out because we couldn't effectively incorporate it into our solution.
Okay. So, Claire, give me a specific way that your thinking changed as a result of reading Serena's findings.
Okay, so Serena, previously I wasn't aware that there were many other grading systems or the potential benefits since our traditional one is so widely used. And so that changed my perspective as to how grading systems can directly impact how students feel about their education.
All right. Good job, ladies.